So you've read The Great Gatsby, right? I mean, who
Right.
hasn't at this point? But here's a question for you. Beyond the glitz, the parties, Gatsby's whole tragic romance, have you ever really stopped to think about George Wilson? You know, the mechanic, the guy from the Valley of Ashes.
It's interesting how he can almost fade into the background, isn't it? Like, he's there, but he's surrounded by these larger-than-life characters like Tom Buchanan, Gatsby himself, and of course Myrtle right in the middle of it all.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We really want to understand George Wilson because even though he might seem like a minor character, well, he's really not. And based on what we've been reading, it seems like he's this like crucial piece of the puzzle when it comes to how Fitzgerald was criticizing American society back in the Roaring '20s.
Well, you almost have to look at him as a foil, like put him next to the other characters. The contrast is just stark. Tom Buchanan, for example, just dripping with wealth and privilege. Gatsby too, right? Even if his money's a little, shall we say, mysterious.
And then there's Wilson stuck in this desolate place, the Valley of Ashes. And it's not just a physical place, right? It's like it represents this whole other side of America, the underbelly of the American dream, so far away from those glittering mansions on Long Island.
And the tragedies too. It's so interesting when you compare what happens to Wilson with what happens to Gatsby. I mean, on the surface, you've got these two guys both caught up in this love triangle, this jealousy over Myrtle. But with Wilson, there's this extra layer of tragedy because he's so clueless. He suspects something's wrong, but he doesn't even know who his real enemy is.
Yeah, that's so true. And speaking of names, one of the things that you pointed out that I thought was really fascinating was Wilson's full name, George B. Wilson. Those are some pretty heavy-hitting names, right? I mean, we're talking George Washington, Woodrow Wilson. What do you think Fitzgerald's doing there, giving this seemingly insignificant character such important names?
Well, it makes you think, doesn't it, about the whole idea of the American dream and whether it was actually working, especially after the First World War. It's like those names, those ideals were supposed to mean something, equality, opportunity. But by the 1920s, things are a lot messier.
Right. It's like the dream is turning into, I don't know, like a nightmare almost. And Wilson, I mean, he's literally described as this dying man in living ash. It's a pretty bleak image.
It is, isn't it? And it's especially striking because while Gatsby came from humble beginnings too, he at least managed to climb that ladder, even if it was a bit crooked. But Wilson, he's stuck.
Hmm.
And your notes about the working class, they really made me think, who pays the price when the dream falls apart? Who gets trampled on? It's often the people who can least afford it.
Yeah, it's like that question from the article we were looking at. Do the working class always end up bearing the brunt of the violence, when things go wrong? And in Gatsby, I mean, both Gatsby and Wilson, they become victims in their own ways, don't they?
Absolutely. Now let's talk about how Fitzgerald actually portrays Wilson. I mean, physically, right there on the page, and the environment he's trapped in. In chapter 2, there's this really vivid description of him.
Yeah, I remember that. He's described as, what was it? Blonde, spiritless, I think.
Anemic and faintly handsome. There's like a flicker of something there, almost a damp gleam of hope. But then when you look at his surroundings, the garage, it's unprosperous and bare, even has this dust-covered wreck of a Ford. It's not exactly a picture of success, is it?
It really isn't. And then there's the whole setting, the Valley of Ashes. In your notes, you compared it to T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, which, I mean, that's just bleak.
Bleak, but accurate, wouldn't you say? It's like that wasteland isn't just about trash and dust. It's about a deeper kind of decay, a moral emptiness that's infected this whole society Fitzgerald's writing about.
And Wilson just blends right into it. He's almost invisible, even to his own wife, right? There's that line where she's walking through her husband as if he were a ghost.
Which is just heartbreaking when you think about it. Now, you were also looking at Fitzgerald's revisions to the manuscript. And it's amazing how carefully he crafted this story.
Right, like how he streamlined the narrative. So, for example, he took out the description of the sign outside the garage and how they first went into the garage. Like, he wanted us to focus on the essentials, on Wilson himself, without getting bogged down in details.
Exactly. And the language, too, that one word, unprosperous. It's so simple, but it really emphasizes Wilson's poverty, especially when you think about all the prosperous imagery we see with Gatsby and the Buchanans. It's like Fitzgerald's quietly underlining the disparity there.
It's so subtle, but it works. And it made me think about that question from your research, why do the poor always believe it will be the rich who save them? It's like, Is it really saving, or is it something
A
else?
very good question. Now, there was another interesting deletion from the manuscript. Initially, Fitzgerald described Wilson as looking custodial, like he just got some poor girl with child.
And then he took that out, right? Why do you think he did that?
Well, think about who he uses that same description for later. Gatsby. It's almost like Fitzgerald was shifting that image, that sense of vulnerability, away from Wilson and giving it to Gatsby instead.
So it's like he's making Wilson even weaker, more passive.
Exactly. And you see it in that scene with Tom, right? Where Wilson's trying to sell him the car. Wilson says, I can't complain. But he doesn't sound very convincing, does he? And Tom just brushes him off. It's like Wilson's so used to being ignored, to being treated like he doesn't matter.
It's tough to watch. And then there were those changes to Wilson's appearance too, right? Like his hair color.
Right. He initially described it as leaden yellow, but then changed it to just pale. And I think that was probably to avoid any confusion with Gatsby. You know, Gatsby's car, his whole image is tied to that yellow color. So Fitzgerald's being careful not to muddy the waters there.
He's really thinking about every little detail, isn't he?
Absolutely. And then there's that moment where he deletes Wilson's suggestion to Tom and Myrtle that they come in the office. Just a small change, but it really emphasizes how powerless Wilson is, even in his own space.
And especially with Myrtle right there. She just takes over, and Wilson's practically invisible.
And let's not forget the lack of, well, religious comfort in the novel. I mean, Michaelis suggests a church to Wilson, but it doesn't seem to offer any real solace. And then there are those eyes, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg always watching. What do you make of that?
Well, it feels like there's this huge spiritual void, right? Like those eyes are there, but they're faded. They're just an advertisement. They represent God, maybe, but a God who's checked out, who's not really paying attention anymore.
It's like the aftermath of the war. You know, people are disillusioned, they've lost their faith.
Mm.
And Wilson, I mean, he's searching for something, anything to hold on to.
And even that one guy, Michaelis, who tries to help, well, his name is interesting too. Your notes mention that Fitzgerald originally called him Mavro Michaelis.
Right. Which could mean Black Michael, a much darker name than just Michaelis, meaning gift from God. That switch from a potentially negative name to a more positive one, it says something, doesn't it? Especially since Michaelis is the closest thing Wilson has to a friend in that moment.
And even the policeman can't remember Michaelis's name, right? It's like there's this overall confusion, a moral fog hanging over everyone.
It really is. And in your notes, you quoted a passage about how people reacted to Wilson's grief. And it's striking how Michaelis, even after living next to Wilson for years, basically says that Wilson never even crossed his mind. He was just one of those worn out men.
It's so sad how invisible he is to everyone.
And then when Wilson tells Tom that he needs money to move west, to start over, Tom's response is just, chillin'. What do you need money for all of a sudden? It's like he can't even fathom why someone like Wilson would dare to dream of a better life.
And that moment where Tom picks Wilson up like a doll, what's going on there? I mean, is that supposed to be a moment of empathy?
I don't think so. Knowing Tom, it's more likely that he's just showing off his power, or maybe even treating Wilson like a child. It's not real compassion, that's for sure.
And of course, it all leads to that awful moment when Tom tells Wilson that Gatsby was the one who killed Myrtle.
It's such a cruel manipulation. Tom knows it's not true, but he uses Wilson's grief and rage to protect himself. And the consequences are devastating. I mean, Fitzgerald himself called the ending a holocaust.
It's hard to even think about it, and I was struck by how, in earlier drafts, Fitzgerald described Wilson as almost becoming part of the Valley of Ashes. Like he merges with the cement-colored walls, he's veiled in ash and dust. It's really a powerful image.
It really is. It's like Fitzgerald's making him a symbol of everything that's been destroyed, everything that's been lost.
So if we pull this all together, Wilson becomes this truly tragic figure, this decent moral man who gets crushed by a society obsessed with money and status. He's like the ultimate representation of the powerless, the forgotten. And that final act of violence, as horrible as it is, it's almost
like a twisted kind of justice, right?
Yeah.
In a world where the real rules don't apply anymore, where the rich and powerful seem to get away with everything.
Exactly. And your point about justice, or the lack of it, was really interesting. You argued that there is no justice for someone like Wilson. He doesn't have that protective shield that wealth gives to characters like Tom and Daisy and Jordan. They can just escape the consequences.
Exactly. And that's why Wilson's story is so heartbreaking. He loses everything. His wife, his dreams, even his life. And for what?
It's this really powerful indictment of the American dream, isn't it? You know, Nick, our narrator, he comes from a privileged background, so he can kind of move through his world, observe it without being completely destroyed by it. But Wilson has nothing.
And what's even more tragic is that he actually believes in the dream.
Yep.
He thinks he can achieve it, and then he gets betrayed, manipulated, used, and in the end, he's just gone.
So even though he's not always at the center of the action, George Wilson is really the heart of the novel, wouldn't you say? He's the broken soul of the Great Gatsby.
I think so. He shows us the dark side of that dream, the human cost of all that glamour and excess.
So we've covered a lot of ground here today. We've seen how George Wilson, this seemingly ordinary man, becomes the symbol of the decaying American dream. We've talked about the struggles of the working class and how Fitzgerald uses Wilson to critique the emptiness and the cruelty of the Roaring Twenties. And we've looked at how his physical description, the setting of the Valley of Ashes, even the way Fitzgerald revised the manuscript, all contribute to his profound impact on the story.
We've explored the complex themes of class, justice, and the elusiveness of the American dream, all through the lens of this one character. And it's a reminder that even the seemingly minor figures in a story can have a tremendous impact.
So I guess the question we leave you with is this. Thinking about Wilson's fate, what does it tell you about the American dream, even today? Is it still possible? Or is it just an illusion, something that leads to heartbreak and disappointment?
And one final thought for you to consider. If Gatsby's world, all that glitz and glamour, represents the false promises of the Roaring Twenties, does the quiet tragedy of George Wilson offer a more enduring and perhaps more disturbing truth about the price we pay for chasing those illusions?
Think about it, and next time you read The Great Gatsby, really pay attention to George Wilson. His story might just change the way you see the entire novel.